Hello and welcome to the MHR podcast. I'm Andy.
And I'm Emma.
How you doing, Emma?
All right. Getting
Yeah.
to the end of July already. Can you believe it?
Yeah, you all right. Okay, well, have you stretched out for this episode? Are you feeling limber?
Limber.
You ready? You pumped?
Well, it's quite early in the morning, so I've limbered as best as I can.
Well, the reason I ask is we're going to talk about a topic that I think... Well, we're going to talk about something today that we don't usually talk about because I've actually deliberately held off on wanting to talk about it because it's been a bit of a grey area of misunderstanding, and I think a lot of people are talking about it but not really in a tangible way. So this week I want to talk about the flexible working bill.
Okay.
Not flexible working, because I think we've had it so much this year in terms of post-COVID, flexible working, what does that mean? Everyone's got their own different interpretation of it. And what I think the flexible working bill has highlighted is most people's understanding of what that is or perception of it isn't actually what it can be. There's lots of elements to it. And I thought we could talk about flexible working bill, what it means, what that means for employees, employers, and actually get a better understanding of what flexible working really means for a business, because it's not just the stereotypical, when am I going to work from home, when am I not? It's a lot more complicated than that.
I think this is a great one to talk about because you're absolutely right. The whole concept of flexible working and just the terminology alone has become so diluted because it means different things to different people. And I think that the introduction of this bill, which came into force last week, is a great way of adding structure to that. Because we do need that post-COVID, trying to understand what it means. There are these additional requirements that people have in terms of their expectations of how they want to work. And this just gives it a way of managing it better.
And I feel like everything we've heard in the last year has all been driven by this kind of post-COVID move of people from offices to home to back to forwards and backwards again, and this idea or research that actually people are saying, we should be working this way or that way. And I don't think there's necessarily any truth to it. This is just a lot of talk, when actually what we could do is talk more about what does flexibility really mean for a business. It's beyond just where you work, it's how you work and how you use those hours and what a business can do to support you. It's not about location, it's not about working in office, it's not about working from home. It's a lot more complicated than that, and that there's it's a business by business need and an employee by employee need, and it's a lot more granular details to that.
No, absolutely. I think it's been very well-being driven, hasn't it? Which we, of course, at the podcast are huge advocates for, and we talk about regularly. But what this also creates, as you say, is actually that pragmatism of how does that translate in day-to-day business? Let's make a structure around this. Let's make it work, and let's create that kind of govern those rules to ensure that it's stuck to accordingly, and we can all move forward.
So there's been lots of guides or articles, depending on your business size, in terms of responses to this flexible working bill. So I was looking at some of the stuff that was written. There's some stuff here as well from the CIPD, I think is always a really good place to look at. So the flexible working bill, what is it? So it's now received Royal Assent, which means that there's a formal request for flexible working will be a day one employment right for new employees. We're expecting that to come into place from 2024, but no date has been confirmed as to when that's going to come in. And I think this is also reflective of the fact that the uptake of flexible and remote working has grown over the last few years. So I think what it's looking at is what can a bill do to kind of shine a light on individual needs, and that's not just about I want to work from there. It's what can a workplace do to support me, to help me on my individual needs, but also what does a business need. And how does a business need to work, and what processes should it put in place to support its employers, but also make sure it's communicating very clearly how it needs its employers to work for them as well.
And dispelling certain myths that are around flexible working as well. It isn't just, as you say, a remote working option. There's so many more different ways to manage and categorise flexible working. And I think that's a really important thing to raise.
So why do we have a bill? So why is the flexible working bill, why has it been introduced? So, I mean, if you think about it, like as 5 years ago, so just before pandemic, right? Flexible working was like a perk. That was like I work a bit there, I work a bit there, or I work from home. Everyone, the standard was you're in office. This is how we work it. And then obviously large macro factors made us rethink how we're going to do that because we couldn't.
Yeah.
We couldn't do that. So it was seen as a progressive thing before pandemic. But the survey shows that just 8.7% of roles being advertised in 2016 were considered flexible. Times have changed. Now, according to some research, 58% of UK businesses currently offer flexible working in some form, right? It's not black and white, it's varying forms of that.
Yeah.
Which has increased by 566% in just 7 years. That's a staggering thing. So clearly, there's an employee demand, but there's also an employer need.
Yeah.
But I think what we could do is have a look at what are those types of flexible working, because it's not just I work 3 days there, 2 days there, or it's not that. That's we're talking there is very basic remote working kind of understanding.
It is.
So I was having a look at some articles that kind of discussed what the forms of flexible working are and how they are useful in different contexts and how different employers would want to use them and how they could benefit different employees.
Okay.
Right? So forms of flexible working, you've got different ones. So you've got staggered hours.
Yeah.
Right? So do you have an understanding of what that is?
Yeah. So effectively, it's effectively changing your hours around in a day, ensuring that you're still working a set amount of hours, and you're more likely need to ensure that you're also working core hours as well.
So that's probably going, okay, well, I have a contract, I have my set hours that I have to work a week. This isn't about location. This is just about I might need to, because of certain things going on for me personally or because of how my life works, I might need to reassess where that hour is taken here, there and there. Do I stagger my day across, whatever? So I'm fulfilling my contractual obligation, but I'm also making sure that if there's factors going around in my life or the business's needs, I can readjust when those hours are taken.
I think it's important to note as well, just looking at the description here, this is different to flexi time in that once a set of staggered hours are agreed, then that's what you are, contractually obliged to do. So say that you have a preference to start at 9:30, for example, say you have a school run that you need to do. That cannot be then flexed in accordance to different requirements. That then becomes your set hours. On the flip side, so we go on to flexi time, which is the next one that you've got on your list here. That is where you more look at your core hours, then you have flexible movement either side of that time.
So staggered hours is kind of a pre-agreed, this is how I shift it. But I stick to that routine.
Preset like, days.
We'll kind of lava lamp move around and reshape. I just like the idea of a lava lamp.
That's very 90s.
Yeah, sorry, I've shown my age there.
Loved my
But I like the idea of going, okay, we've all agreed the hours, but you're going to flex on how you take them. That's going to be more of a kind of ever-changing thing.
Yeah, absolutely. So with flexi time, that might be I have an urgent appointment first thing in the morning, so I'm going to use my hours later in the day to make up for that time. So that tends to be something that can get written into a contract to say on the provision that you work your core hours. So for example, 10 till 4, you can be flexible on when you come in and when you leave on the proviso that you fulfill your contractual agreement.
Great. And I suppose there's a difference there between kind of what is a casual manager's understanding. Because, hey, I've got an appointment today. Oh, yeah, it's fine. I don't care. Or actually what you want to write in so you can support that legally or just make sure that people...
Yeah, it can be down to an employer's discretion on the structure of that, I guess. I imagine certainly in some industries, thinking kind of manufacturing and more of your physical work, that needs to be managed a lot more carefully. Because of, machine operators, you have to have somebody in place there. They can't have that over flexibility. And that's where, and it mentions here where this staggered hour system might be better. because that's still creating a structure as to when they are expected to come in.
It works around them,
and
but
they
it's
can
fixed.
work exactly, which means that the employer has an opportunity to put something in place to manage that change.
I like that. I get that, because there are some businesses, there's lots of organisations, they can't ever have off time. So you can't give the full flexibility to everyone, because otherwise you're going to find bits where you're just not operating.
Well, you have those gaps.
Yeah, absolutely.
Friday afternoons come to mind. For that one.
So then you come into part-time working, so that's reducing hours, often working fewer days or working shorter days. So that's just, and usually that typically comes from, because that as a request would come in as a result of changing what you're currently on, isn't it? Like if you start a part-time hour contract, you're starting a part-time hour contract. What we're talking about is here going, I'm on a full-time or I'm doing different hours, but I need to reduce those hours.
I want the opportunity to reduce those hours. Yeah, which is something that's a fairly standard request. That can be from childcare, it can be lifestyle changes, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Then you've got compressed hours. So this, the whole point here is you're the reallocation of your work into maybe fewer or longer blocks of your week. So, for example, if you're working full time over fewer days, maybe you're doing such as like a 9-day fortnight, or 4 day. You know, so you might even remove the days off you've got between, or you might make your days a lot longer. So again, I suppose that's meeting what you've already agreed in terms of a number of hours.
Yeah,
it's similar to staggered time, isn't it? But what you're doing is you're just pushing the time between those.
So for a typical 37.5-hour week, for example, you may do 8 till 5 Monday to Thursday to be able to finish at 12 o'clock on a Friday. That's a good example of compressed hours, whereby you're still fulfilling the requirements of your contract, whilst then being able to take time off where you need it and fulfill that full-time roster.
You've got job sharing as well as another one. That's an interesting one, because it's never something I've fully understood. But it's you're working part time, but someone else has got the same role as you, and what you're doing is you're splitting the responsibility of that role, or that contract, I guess. Well, not your own contract, but you know what I mean. Like you're both facilitating one role. Yeah,
I guess that's an example of a job where it does require a full-time resource on it, and so a job sharing is a way of managing that. If you want to take on 2 part-time people, I think that becomes more of an attractive concept if you have, a person that's reduced their hours to part-time, whose kind of knowledge in that job role is invaluable. And so is there a way in which we can bolster that to ensure that we always have that resource from kind of start to finish in the week? When I've looked at that in the past, I've tended to see that more in kind of public sector. To ensure that you've got full management, whereas I think in private sector, certainly in office roles, I think it's the job role itself that gets adjusted more so than the people time that is needed to manage it.
Cool. Here's one that's been talked about a lot for the last maybe couple of years: 4-day work week. Obviously, lots of research has been done on that, lots of tests. I don't know where the general consensus is on that, but the idea is being that, can we do research to understand how we can optimise productivity in a shorter space of time? Is it working best as a 5 or a 4-day week? But I suppose that's, I don't know what the answers are for that. But this is, I suppose, in this context, looking at, can someone request that? And I suppose that's also looking at that's along the lines of that kind of compressed hour approach.
And theoretically from the back of this bill, that yes, a 4-day work week can be requested, but something that we'll come on to shortly is that will always come down to the discretion of the employer. I think there's a lot more work that needs to be done to understand the potential impact of that, and I know that there have been some kind of on scale, en masse case studies in some businesses that have trialled it. But I think that it's never going to be a one-size-fits-all approach anyway.
It's got to depend on the business and what they need as well.
That's when you as an employee consider your own needs and, look for, companies that align with your requirements in that sense. In this particular case, I don't think it's something that can be overly forced.
And then the last one I've got here is probably the most common one that people think of in regards to flexible working, but it's hybrid working.
Yes.
So that's where employees travel into the office for some days a week and then work remotely for others. Lots of companies do this. Lots of companies have policies or contracts on this. So it's usually that they'll work from home. I mean, we talked only a couple of weeks ago about sneaky holidays.
We did.
Which is kind of where where people are maybe exploiting a hybrid working environment to actually pretend they're working, but they're working from somewhere else.
On the Fanta Lemon.
Yeah. But that is something that's become increasingly more popular because of COVID and realizing that because we had to work from home, how do we then maybe meet in the middle ground based on what a company needs and what's suitable for employees for that business?
You're absolutely right. That's been one of the most kind of organic responses to this flexible working concept is trying to find that compromise and that middle ground, and that's with hybrid working.
So it has benefits on both sides. You've got it allows organisations to save money if they don't want to use that business space, and it allows employees to save money on a commute. However, on the other side, it can actually mess that up, because actually if you force a hybrid thing on someone when that isn't suitable for that person because of how their lifestyle works, actually you give them a bigger problem, because they're like, well, I don't have the facility to work from home. Or a business might go, well, actually, we're building new facilities for you because it's going to make your life easier, and you're going to have to you can spend less money. So there's arguments both sides, but it's got to be on the business by business basis and an employee by employee basis, which is why I think the flexible working bill is so important, because it enables people to start a conversation, and then you can have a meaningful one in that business context, and it empowers employees to be able to go, this is something I think would benefit me. Let's start a discussion on how the business can help that.
Yeah, for sure.
So I think that gives us a bit of a better understanding on what the bill means and what flexible working really means, because I in my head I always had it as flexible working. Now it's just hybrid, isn't it? Like, when am I going to work? When am I not? Where am I going to do it from? It's way more complex than that. It's got to factor in a whole broad range of people's needs and what's suitable for a company.
Absolutely.
So, what does a company do? How can a company support those requests? What's appropriate? So, advice that CIPD gives is if people are going to utilise this bill, is that firstly you need to respond promptly. Flexible working requests. They need to be completed. They need to have a good process in place where you can review these, assess the needs. Employers and managers should seek to respond to requests as quickly as they're able to do so, to ensure that people aren't disengaged as well, because there may be a very important reason why someone's asking for that kind of to be reviewed, and if it's not seen to be supported or considered important, then people are like, well, you don't care about how I'm supporting you.
And for the employee as well, that that will have been considered for them, and it will become of high importance and potentially even urgency.
Yeah.
So that needs to be respected. Kind of what an employer decides to do is at their discretion. Yeah. But to respond promptly and ensure that the employee knows where they stand is really, really important.
So businesses who are facilitating these kind of changes should also consider the request and explore options as well. And I think that's really important, especially with what we've talked about today. You've got loads of different flexible working options that might suit your need. You might, because you're not aware of all of them, go, I want to do this now. And actually, if the HR team and your management team can come to you and go, well, actually, there's other options you could do, and it might benefit you in another way. Because actually, if we do this, for example, you might save some money, or you might be able to have so it's always obviously the employer's role to make sure that the employee has all the options available to them.
Yeah.
But making sure you have that conversation is going to open up some other things, because especially me as an employee, I might be naive. I might think, I just want to do that. And someone can go, you know what, you can do other things, It'll really benefit you if you look at that.
Yeah, I think having that flexible dialogue is really important, isn't it? Rather than just a flat sort of yes, no. Certainly if it's the latter, then as you said in the previous point, that can be really incredibly demotivating and disconcerting if they feel that their request hasn't been considered. And compromise is so important.
Yeah. So businesses should also encourage trial periods. It's a big shift, isn't it? If you're, especially if a business is used to working one way and then they're suddenly going to start doing things with employees in a different way than they're used to, you want to set a specific place of time where you kind of monitor, are we getting the same productivity? Is it, is the return for us helpful? But also, is that person feeling the benefit of this change? Do they want to check back in and go, actually, I didn't feel like that setup worked and I need to change some things? So you can't just make a decision and run with it. You've got to make sure that you're reviewing how that's working on both sides.
Yeah, and I think it's a fair option to offer a trial period as well.
Yeah.
Certainly if, we're looking at more of the tricky things like part-time, 4-day, where there is a clear reduction in capacity, I should say.
Yeah.
To be able to evidence that the productivity is still where it needs to be.
Yeah.
Because then that gives both the employer and the employee a chance to explore that option and see whether it works for them.
Yeah. And then obviously train managers. This is a new approach. If you don't have a manager that understands what flexi working is or what that can do or what the process is, you're ultimately not going to be able to facilitate these discussions or make sure you're tracking the productivity of your team. So you do need to input some manager training on, how do they deal with these requests, because we will have that right to make it.
Yeah.
And then the last tip they've given us here is also to focus on recruitment. You can be proactive. Candidates are increasingly interested in flexible working opportunities in whatever form they come. It's not just the ones we usually expect. So how can we encourage people to come to our organisation because of what we are able to show them and how it's suitable for their role, but also how it's suitable for how our business needs to work? So I think it's also thinking about what benefits your organisation offers in terms of how we work and why that's great for us and why we want certain people. Because that way you're breeding a culture there, aren't you?
Exactly. It's bringing people into the business that are on the same wavelength, which is so important for the success of a business, and ensuring that you have the best setup with your employees to optimise your business in the best way as well.
Yeah. So we've waffled about it a lot, but flexible working is an interesting one. There's a bill coming out, so everyone needs to be more aware of the different types of flexible working that means. Everyone needs to be more aware that actually, businesses need to judge case by case on what's most suitable for the way they work. And I think businesses need to be more aware of how they can make sure they can hold proactive, but also supportive discussions with employees. So they can make sure they're facilitating that and also supporting employees in the right way.
Yeah.
But reflect, and all requests should be managed fairly. They should be managed reasonably, and they should be done in a way that opens an employee's eyes to all the options available. So an employer is not just going yes or no. They're going, how can we actually facilitate a way of working that feels most comfortable for you, but also most suitable for the business. So that's the flexible working bill in a nutshell. We'll know more details, I imagine, later in the year as to when it's coming in 2024. So there you go.
Exciting stuff.
I believe you might have an email. I certainly do, from assistant to the producer Tom.
I don't.
Do you not? Okay, it's just me this week.
I've been banished this week.
So I have an email from Tom. I'm going to read it out.
Okay.
Hopefully that's what he wants me to do. Hi Andy, you've both spoken about different types of flexible working options that employees can have, but how many can you remember without looking? The government outlines 8 different types of flexible working. How many can you name, Emma?
Oh, right. Okay. I'll make sure that I'm not cheating.
Okay.
I'll put up something else. Just hang on.
Stop looking at your screen.
All right.
Come on. This is quick. We've just talked about this. They know. They've been listening.
Where can I look so that... I tell you what. That makes more sense, doesn't it?
All right. Come on.
Okay.
Clock is ticking.
You've got staggered hours.
Staggered hours. Got it. Yeah.
Flexible hours.
Got it. Yeah.
Part-time.
Got it.
Job sharing.
Yeah. You're on fire.
Hybrid working.
That's a... yes. Yeah.
That was one of the options.
Yeah. That was one of the options of the article, but it's kind of not here there yet. Keep going.
Oh,
keep going.
Okay. Yeah. Compressed hours.
Yeah.
4-day week.
Yes-ish. Yeah. Yeah. That was in the article.
Not quite in their list.
It's not in their government's list.
Not in the government's list.
I get it. It was in the article we're talking about.
Okay. So we've had staggered, flexi, compressed, part-time, job share.
Yeah.
Remote working, is that in as an option?
Yeah. Ish.
Me-ish, we'll take that. Ooh, how many have I got?
I think you've kind of done them all. The
Have
problem
I?
is, assistant producer Tom has taken the government's list, and we've been reading an article from maybe the CIPD. So your options are job sharing, working from home, part-time working, compressed hours, flexible hours, so flexible working, staggered hours, annualised hours, and phased retirement, which we didn't talk about today.
Oh, phased retirement. Oh, okay.
So there are all your options. There you go. You did okay. You did
I did
very
all
well
right.
on what we talked about,
Thank
but
you.
Tom wasn't listening. And he signed off his email today, Hasta la vista, Tom, the UK's most flexible worker, in his signature there. Bit too flexible for my liking.
I don't know if that's a bit of an ego thing, like a bit of a flex. Are you saying that you're a...
He keeps doing yoga in the office and
gymnast?
it's putting everyone off. Yeah.
No one needs to see that.
His downward dog's got actual complaints.
Oh, yeah, I can believe that.
Anyway, that's us for this week. Thank you for chatting with us about flexible working bills and what that's going to mean for next year. We'll be talking about something else next week, I imagine.
I imagine we will.
We probably won't
Yeah.
still be talking about this. So hopefully you're already excited, and we'll see you then.
See you then.
I've been
Thanks.
Andy.
And I've been Emma.
Cheers.
Thanks.